Hey everybody, this is Juan from the Two Brothers Real Estate Team, and today we're going to be talking about part 2 of things to look for when buying an older home. Okay, so why don't we get started with it? Alright guys, so on my last video, I talked about the first 7 things to look for when buying an older home. Now, if you haven't watched the video, I want you to click right above here to the link and make sure that you watch the video before you watch this video. But of course, if you already watched the video, let's move on to the next set of things to look for when buying an older home, okay? So the next thing to look for is asbestos. So asbestos was used for insulation and fireproofing probably until the 1990s, okay? So of course, if you're gonna be buying a home older or around the 1990s, make sure that you definitely check and see if there's asbestos in the home. Now, asbestos can be found on tiles, house siding, cement, plaster, and so many other things, okay? Now, of course, I don't have to tell you this, but asbestos causes cancer, plus other illnesses that of course nobody wants to have. Now, Canada has banned those materials or materials containing asbestos, I don't know, probably 2018 or so. So you're pretty safe if you're buying a new home, but when you're buying an older home, this is something that you should be definitely looking into. Alright guys, the next thing to look for when buying an older home is something called radon, okay? Which is a radioactive gas that can actually increase the risk of lung cancer. Now, radon exposures causes about 16% of lung cancer deaths in Canada, okay? So of course, it is a big deal. Now, it usually enters the house through any opening where the house is in direct contact with the soil. So for example, if you have cracks on the foundation, that's where the gas will go into your house. Okay, the next thing to look for when buying an older home is of course, be aware of any signs of termite damage, okay? Now, termite infestations can cause severe damage to any wooden component in your home, and that includes the floors, the drywall, any structural support, okay? Now, termites are usually found on the southern parts of Canada, especially along the coast, okay? Now, some signs of termite damage include hollow sounding wood, discoloration, bubbling or warping of wood surfaces, flake of the paint, or the wallpaper or plaster are on the floor, okay? Okay, the next thing to look for when buying an older home is of course those weird smells, okay? Now, if you actually can smell like a weird smell, it could be an indication of the presence of mold or mildew, okay? Now, of course, mold and mildew can cause respiratory problems or allergies, okay? So of course, if you have asthma, that's definitely gonna affect you, okay? Now, it can also lead to structural damage to your home, okay? So it's not just about the health stuff, but also your home is gonna be affected by it. Now, musty smells can also indicate a presence of mice, but if you smell like ammonia, it actually is probably a sign that there is a rat infestation. Okay, next on our list on things to look for when buying an older home is are water leaks, okay? Now, water leaks can seriously damage your home, okay? Now, not only that, but excessive moisture can encourage, of course, the growth of mold or mildew, okay? Now, when looking for signs of water damage, make sure that you look for bubbles on the ceiling, underneath the bathroom, for example, brownish stains on the ceiling, maybe the floor is warped, okay, or lifted, and of course make sure that the basement is dry, because if it is wet, it's a sign of maybe a water leak. Okay, another thing to look for when buying an older home is actually those popcorn ceilings, you know, that texture ceiling that you see in older homes. Now, they were usually common between the 1930s to about the 1990s. Now, I'm not talking about the popcorn ceiling because they're ugly, but because they might contain asbestos. And of course, we talked about how bad asbestos can be for your health. Now, removing that ceiling is actually pretty labor intensive because they actually have to scrape off the whole ceiling by hand. All right, guys, now let's talk about the last thing for part 2 when it comes down to buying an older home, and that's looking for uneven steps or an even sidewalk. Now, of course, it actually makes sense. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because it can actually be a tripping hazard, but more importantly, sometimes it's an indicator of a structural damage. Okay, so there you have it, guys. This is the part 2 on things to look for when buying an older home. Make sure I'm gonna be putting the link for part 1 right below in the description. Make sure that you watch it if you missed it. And if you have any questions, concerns, make sure that you actually reach us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook at the Two Brothers Real Estate Team. Okay, until then, I'll see you later.